Yes. Leif Cocks, welcome to Life in a Garden Online. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know it's afternoon there and it could be a little bit inconvenient for you to, be around at this time of day.
No, you're most welcome.
Thank you. Leif, would you start with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I guess I'm a conservation biologist, how I would describe myself. And yeah, for the last 30 years, I've been on a journey to save orangutans, as well as the other megafauna, such as elephants and tigers, in their natural habitat. And so hopefully take orangutans, the rainforest, and all the other biodiversity through this extinction crisis.
Why orangutans specifically?
It's really not orangutan specifically in the sense is saving the rainforest is saving the whole world, because destruction of the rainforest is one of the most significant causes of climate change, and it's been replaced by unsustainable monocultures, which are going to destroy future economic prosperity for the people living in these countries. So it's about making a better world for everybody. Orangutans as non-human persons without any rights, but being sentient, self-aware, and in fact the most intelligent person on the planet next to humans. It makes it equally, doubly important for us to compassionately try to save as many as possible and bring their species through the extinction crisis.
How close are they to extinction at this point?
All orangutan species, and there's 3 of them, are classified by the International Union for Nature Conservation as critically endangered. That means without turning around the immediate threats and the destruction of the population, they will go extinct, imminent extinction. And so we have no time to waste. We've got really the next 10 years to try to turn this around. Otherwise, there'll be orangutans, but their populations will be so small that they will eventually spiral into extinction.
Where are they basically located, the 3 different species?
There's 2 islands for which orangutans live on. They used to go all the way down to Java and all the way up into southern China, but they've been slowly driven to over-extinction for a number of centuries, and of course accelerated in the last 50 years. They still remain on the island of Borneo, where you had the Bornean orangutans with 3 to 5 subspecies. Then on the island of Sumatra, we have 2 species of orangutans, the Sumatran and the Tapanuli.
Can I ask you a strange question? I mean, I think the Joe public at large was introduced to orangutans by Clint Eastwood in Any Which Way You Can. I don't think I ever saw an orangutan before that. Are they naturally a friendly species?
They are naturally friendly and noble species, and certainly in comparison to humans. Humans and their close relative chimpanzees also capable of empathy and compassion, are also capable of destruction and war and malicious destruction of other persons. Orangutans don't have that ability. And the best way I can describe is the reality is we've killed over 1 million of them in the most horrific way possible, burning them alive, macheting them to death, and shooting their eyes out with pellets, as we've slowly butchered them into being critically endangered. But although they're 7 to 10 times stronger than a human, and the males have canines the same size as tigers, there's not one instance of orangutan ever killing a human being in a zoo, in a sanctuary, in the wild. So they don't seem to have that kill switch and that brutality, which unfortunately so much characterizes the human species.
Yeah, we managed to do that with a fair amount of aplomb, don't we? We're very violent. You, in one of the photos that I shared, are wearing a mask. Is that because of COVID or because you're protecting the orangutans?
It really depends on the situation. There's many orangutans which I basically worked and lived with for 15, 16 years. And of course, there's no need for protection anymore because we basically are of the same, I guess, status as far as diseases. But if we are entering and close to orangutans which are of a different health status, it's always very good to be very cautious and protect the orangutan from any potential diseases, because with orangutans, they share 97% of genetic material from us, and so they can catch all our diseases. But as we've seen how when we introduce diseases to naive populations, wiping out millions in South America, hundreds of thousands on the Pacific Islands, as just a couple examples, we've got to be very cautious about introducing, let's say, human diseases into a naive orangutan population, which could decimate them.
Do you remember your first encounter with an orangutan?
Yes. I do remember, and yeah, and obviously being struck by their humanity, and of course discovering in these beautiful animals a personhood, an individual self-aware being such as us, and as I described, in some ways a far more noble form of person than we normally experience within our own species.
Tell us about them as a troop. I mean, are they individuals, or do they move as a troop? Are they good parents? How do they hang out?
Okay, first of all, that we describe them as semi-solitary, and the best way of describing that is country people, or people who live on farms. So you might be, familiar with this in your own experience, where individual family groups live on their own farm and gain the sustenance from their farm. But at Christmas and Easter, the extended family all comes together and they enjoy their company, and they enjoy coming across it and connecting with each other. But they all return to their individual farms. Similarly, orangutans do this. They live in their own territories, and when they're big fruiting trees, they all get together and infants play. So they have a rich and beautiful social system, but they spend most of the time living alone in their own territories. The main exception to us is they're all single mothers. Now, the reason being is, as humans, the most dangerous thing a human female can do is have a baby. It's the most dangerous thing she can do, as far as biologically, because they have the narrow hips in order to walk bipedally. So it's a very painful, dangerous process of giving birth, which doesn't occur in orangutans, because you don't have to walk bipedally. And also the infants are born immature and helpless compared to other species. So human females have to bond with a male in order to traditionally get the support they need to raise their infants. Orangutans not needing that and having no natural predators, and orangutan males being twice the size of the female, basically these large fruit-eating machines, the best thing they can do for their offspring is to get the hell out of there and go to another territory to leave maximum food for their offspring. So all orangutans are single mothers. But the second part of your question is, are they good mothers? They are the most wonderful mothers in the animal kingdom. They suckle the infants for 8 years and give them the love and the nurturing. And although orangutans babies can cry, other than just after birth, I've never heard them cry, because they get all the love and support that they need. And now this is very important, because they have to grow up and raise their own infants alone, and not supported day to day by the whole community, such as humans do. Humans, we raise their children as part of a whole community, as a tribal species. They don't do that. But to do that, they have to be extremely mentally strong and independent. They have to be so sure of themselves. And how the mothers make sure that the infants grow up mentally strong and secure is give them all the love in the world. We know with humans, we know with chimpanzees, you give a love and supporting environment to children, they grow up confident and independent. If they don't get that, they become insecure and not successful in life. And orangutans can't afford to have the lack of confidence and lack of self-assuredness, because there's not a group to support them. And therefore, we get these very confident, beautiful beings which are emerged from the system. And sometimes we actually, when you're making friends with orangutans, it's some of the most purest and beautiful friendships that a human being can experience.
Leif, if she suckles for 8 years, does she not have another offspring? For another
No,
8
she
years?
doesn't. So the average interbirth interval is 9 years for the Sumatran orangutan. Different species have different interbirth intervals, but it's 9 years. So there's 8 years of suckling, and what happens is there's two things happen. For the first 4 years, the suckling alone inhibits reproduction. You know, the suckling infant, and then after that, she takes another 3 or 4, 5 years to gain the body fat levels. You know, for example, female athletes who don't have enough body fat do not menstruate anymore, because nature's saying you're not getting enough nutrients and resources to support yourself. No use having a child, because that child will die and you will die with it. So once you get to a certain body fat level, you'll start cycling again. And orangutans have to wait to build up their body fat levels after so many years of raising an infant, and the infant becoming more independent, finding its own food while being with the mother, that she can have enough body fat levels. And we think that's quite separate, but it's actually also true for humans. The natural interbirth interval for humans is actually somewhere around 5 years. Orangutans are the slowest reproducing species, well, but we're not too far behind. And also for humans, we know that once the birth interval falls below 5 years, you actually do have very much increased mortality in human females, because we are too also for this very slow.
Welcome back. I can see clearly now the light is on. Your sound's gone, Leif. There you go. You're back.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Have a look.
Can you hear me now, Leif?
Did
I start singing? Because then you won't want to hear me.
Still can't hear you. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's suddenly.
It's not muted from this end.
Got my speaker on.
Do you want to go up? Let me send him a message. Not working.
Okay. Sorry about this. My mic seems to be working, the video seems to be working, so I'm assuming that you can hear me.
Perfectly.
I simply can't hear you.
Can everybody else hear me?
See if I can.
Yeah. Okay. So yes.
Testing.
Leif, do you want to go back out and come back in, or can you hear me now? You're looking at me. I'll show you.
Testing.
Can you hear me?
Testing. I can hear you now.
Yay!
Sorry about that. For some reason, it seemed to timed out. So my apologies.
No worries. Gave me time to think of another question to ask you. No, okay. So we were talking about the whole gestation period, the looking after the suckling. What happens after that 8 years? Does the offspring suddenly say, "Hey, Mom, I'm leaving home. Here's the key to the door"?
The males tend to leave about that time, and just like human males, they go off and form little bands of troublemakers and go through the rainforest causing trouble and undertake high-risk behaviors, and actually die at a great rate. And this actually does make a lot of sense, because you don't actually want a lot of the males to survive, because you really only want the best genetics to survive.
Yeah, that's how we feel about men as well.
Exactly. And so, and that's just why, human males, as similarly, what we do is we take high risk behavior, that we do adventure sports and extreme, and that sort of stuff. And what we're saying, despite our stupid behavior, we're still surviving. and therefore our genes are good. And so they leave the natal territory and they go off and cause trouble and mischief and have a high death rate. The females, just like with humans, are far more important. You can't have females dying. If 1% of the females die, the whole population spirals into extinction fairly quickly. So it's extremely important that all the females survive, and there's very low mortality rate. And so they stay with the mother, and they learn how to raise an infant from the mother as the mother raises the next infants, because female maternal behavior is learnt, culturally learnt, transmitted from generation to generation, because orangutans predominantly adapt to the environment, not by natural selection, and that is done through the males, but by culture passed on from female to female. And then when she's finally ready to leave, she actually sets up the territory next to her mother. So if you go through a patch of rainforest, all the female orangutans tend to be related to each other as an extended family group. And because they set up the territories next to their mother, they're very familiar with the territories and the dangers and the food sources. And so they have maximum chance of survival.
At what age do we consider them fully grown?
They can breed in the wild as young as 10 or 12, but not usually. Normally they start breeding about at the age of 15 is the average age that orangutans breed. So we often consider them mature once they're able and ready to reproduce and start their own family group.
Leif, what do they actually eat? Well, you said fruit, but what sort of fruit?
Mm-hmm. They eat a huge variety of fruit, something like 2,000 different fruits and bark and leaves within the rainforest. And so it's extremely diverse. And all species are intelligent in their own way. And orangutans are far more intelligent than humans in their way. The best way to maybe characterize it, they may be dunce in a classroom, but they're geniuses in the rainforest. And they develop these temporal spatial maps over multiple years, because the rainforest trees often only fruit 5 to 7 years. And they develop these maps of the area, knowing which each fruiting tree is and when it will fruit and flower over multiple years. And they retain this cultural map in their brains, and therefore they move around and exploit and get to the fruit before other fruit-eating species.
And what quantities do they need to eat to survive? I mean, obviously an overpopulation would decimate the rainforest, or is that not really entertainable?
Mm-hmm. They eat several kilograms a day. They're a large-bodied, large-brained animal, and our brain, same with humans, being smart is a huge cost. You don't want to become smart without reason to. So intelligent has to have a reason. The reason being is the brain is very energy hungry. So if you become smart and don't need it, you could actually go extinct real quick, because you're trying to support a brain and can't get enough food. So if you're going to get a big brain, you better use it really good. Otherwise, it's actually a disadvantage. And orangutans have big brains to remember everything and to survive in a rainforest. And so they basically, we call them almost starvation specialists. So they could build up the body fat and it goes down, because although they live very spaced out in the rainforest in very low densities, they're always on the edge. And therefore, it's really not possible to increase the density of orangutans. But of course, that's not how natural systems work. I know, if you have somebody who says they clear some farmland and they say, well, what happened to the wild animals? And they just went further into the bush or something. Well, that's not how it works. They died, or another animal died, because animals expand to fill the ecological niche that can supply. An animal's not going to simply die and not starve and starve to death if there's food available. And so all natural systems, the animals breed and expand until the capacity of an ecosystem. So when we take away a part of an ecosystem, some animals have to die. And orangutans obviously traditionally are at capacity. So when we destroy their forest, even though the orangutan, even if they're not killed by the destruction of the forest immediately, the orangutans will eventually starve to death due to lack of resources.
So we are busy decimating rainforests. We're changing the trees to palm trees for palm oil. How much damage is that doing?
Oh, it's driving the orangutans, the elephants, the tigers, the indigenous communities and biodiversity to extinction, because these unsustainable monocultures, which include palm oil, are just expanding at a great rate. And yeah, there's really very little wilderness left. You know, all the species have got their backs against the wall, mostly living in unviable patches of the rainforest, trying to survive. And it's our job is to piece together enough viable ecosystems of the right type, shape, size, and shape of rainforest to take the orangutans and other species through this extinction crisis.
So can you relocate them?
There's no way to relocate, you know, because there isn't either. If the rainforest left with orangutans, it's at capacity for orangutans, you know, because, you know, no orangutan has gone and killed itself and died or starved. There's food there, so they're all at capacity. So as the rainforests disappear, there's surplus orangutans which are dying, and so there really is no place else to put them. So as their forest goes, they go.
There was that really, really disturbing video of the orangutan fighting off the big caterpillar machine, you know, from the tree. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see that. What can we do to help besides not buy palm oil? I mean, it's in everything today, palm oil.
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is before it's too late, the next 10 years, we're piecing together leasing and managing the last viable ecosystems and piecing together the right type, shape, and size of the forest, because a lot of forest which is left is not suitable for orangutans, elephants, and tigers. It's at least valuable highland areas. In order for orangutans and the species to survive, they need a valuable lowland and riverine forest where all the plantations want to put their plantations. And so we're piecing together these ecosystems. And of course, what we most need is the funds to do this. Seems like avoiding palm oil doesn't work. It seems logical. I've got a rainforest and it's replaced by palm oil, and therefore I stop palm oil, they'll stop replacing the rainforest. But the reality is, even if we ban all palm oil tomorrow, they will replace that forest with another unsustainable monoculture, which is going to give them good income for the short term, and there's other alternatives. So by addressing single products or single companies, we're not really solving the problem. We really have to collectivize and you know, join organizations such as the Orangutan Project and help support them to make that meaningful change on the ground.
When did you start the Orangutan Project?
I started in 1998.
So it's well established now.
Yes, it's been many years. Of course, I was working with orangutans long before that, but that was when I started this particular project, as well as our sister projects, the International Elephant, International Tiger projects, in order to become a vehicle to help people collectivize with us in a large enough scale to make a meaningful impact on their conservation.
So how do you go about that? I mean, what are you doing to raise awareness, to raise funds?
To raise funds, we're doing everything we can. You know, I write books. I've got 3 books. 2 of them are still out there. Is the Orangutans, My Cousins and My Friends, and Finding Our Humanity. I do talks and lectures, fundraising events. And we have online fundraising through Facebook and social media. And we have volunteers who go out and do stores and connect at markets and raise money and sell. So we have a wide range of ways that, you know, all the volunteers and staff have joined together to raise enough money. And then we put that into funding our strategic plan to save orangutans in the field. Yes, through some fantastic projects and some fantastic people who are on the front line at saving the orangutans.
Now, clearly, this is a full-time job, but I mean, do you earn a living doing this, or do you have a full-time job as well and look after orangutans?
Yeah, this is my full-time job for the first half of running the Orangutan Project. I did it on my holidays and weekends and nights while earning my living as a small population biologist, and helping people manage orangutan colonies. But it just got too big, and we needed too much work, and so a few years ago I transferred into, this is solely what I do full time, is saving orangutans.
So now I have to ask this: do you have a special relationship with any particular orangutan?
There's certainly many orangutans which have had special relationships over the years. Ones where, let's say, for example, Sakara, where she injured a toe and had to be amputated.
Oh, sure.
So I became her mother for many weeks and nursed her and looked after her, and basically became an orangutan mother for some time before, once she got better, introducing her and giving her back to her mother. And it's also with Tamara and Semaru, two orangutans which I took from babies from their birth, being with them at their birth, and taking them all the way on that journey until they were in their teens, and then taking them and releasing them in the wild in habitat that was secured with our wildlife protection units, and then letting them to go free and wild again.
How did you come to be in the same space as these orangutans when the mothers were giving birth? Are these rescued orangutans?
These Tamara and Semaru, as two examples, they were born at a zoo where I was managing that colony, and so because orangutans are self-aware persons, they don't belong in zoos, even though they can subsist there. Their mental health and physical well-being cannot ever be substituted by captivity. Similar for us, we know people who live in refugee camps, even if the people running refugee camps are some of the nicest dedicated people, there's long-term psychological damage from, as persons, not controlling our futures, not controlling who and when we can interact with. And orangutans suffer the same thing. And so with the orangutans, which were born when I was looking after them, I endeavored to take them on a journey to be free back in the wild. So one day that the orangutans, no orangutans need to be in captivity. Our vision is that one day all orangutans will live in the wild, free in secure populations.
How does the mother cope when you take her child away from her to raise it and put it into the wild? Or was it an interactive thing?
When orangutan is at the natural age of dispersion, i.e. when the orangutan is ready to leave the mother, because I'm with the orangutan from birth and I'm with the mother from birth, and so the orangutan knows me and has been playing with me, and I've been playing with the mum and baby since birth. And so once they, at the natural age, just like teenagers, your teenage children, naturally they start spending less and less time at home, that they're more and more interested in developing other relationships and leaving. And at that time, move them into living by themselves more and more, taking them, living into trees, learning how to find food in trees, training them to come back to me. So in the rainforest, I can call them back and make sure they're okay. And then transporting them to the new environment, keeping them in a cage in the rainforest for 2 weeks, and bringing in the forest fruits so they're getting used to the environment, used to the smells, collecting all the different fruits and giving to them, releasing them in the forest, and then following them for about 2 to 3 years, myself initially, and then the Indonesian technicians, to always be with them and support them as they slowly adapt to living free in the wild.
You mentioned zoos, and we were having a discussion the other day. Should zoos still exist?
It really depends, any extreme things are usually not the answer. And the example I give is I used to look after giraffes. And giraffes are basically cows on stilts. And, and if you kept giraffes in an open range zoo with plenty of area and a natural herd, and they get fed, and they get top class veterinary care, and if I was that giraffe and you came to me and said, look, I've got an alternative for you. Instead of just living here with your group and getting fed and, and having a good time, or I'll send you out on the African savannah where there's hyenas nipping at your heels at night, I'd probably say, nah, not for me. I'm quite happy here. For my level of intelligence or whatever, this is actually quite a good environment, that I'm quite looked after. And so there's some animals, such as the example, mentally and physically in the right environment can, they do quite well and live happy lives. But it doesn't hold true for highly intelligent persons such as elephants and the great apes. For the reasons I explained earlier, they don't do well mentally in captivity. They normally suffer, same way psychologists can look at institutionalized people in mental facilities and prisons. They see the same behaviors developed in non-human persons which are in captivity. So it's really about zoos, in a sense, evolving, if that makes sense, to support animals which are suitable for them and connecting people in a meaningful way, which isn't harmful to the animals which are displayed.
I mean, there was a huge outcry here. Our Johannesburg Zoo, we had 2 elephants and the 1 elephant died. And instead of releasing the second elephant into the wild, they acquired another elephant. And there was a huge outcry from the public here about that. I mean, the elephant enclosure is not, it's a really sad looking elephant. And now we have 2 sad looking elephants. It's very...
Yeah, no, exactly. Most enlightened zoos recognize that, elephants shouldn't be in captivity. They don't breed in captivity, and they pretend there's a conservation effort, like they have a breeding program. It's all not true. The reason being is the female elephants have to actually lower the vulva in order for the male elephant to penetrate. So they make that conscious choice of the bull, and they won't do that for captive bulls because they're mentally destroyed. So it's a very unattractive guy. If a woman, you'll probably go, oh, he's not very attractive, I don't really want to mate with him. And that's how all female elephants look at all the males, because they're mentally destroyed, and I'm not going to mate. And what we find even in let's say elephant sanctuaries which are in Sumatra, all the females only get pregnant from the wild bulls that come in. They don't mate with the captive males.
A lot of horny old males in Sumatra.
Yeah. Well, what happens is, there's these, so for example, they say that these elephant camps, they're breeding elephants, but they're only breeding elephants because there's still a few wild males hanging on and able to get to the females at night. So in the end, if all elephants were left in captivity, they will go extinct, and because they don't do mentally well, and there's no conservation value, and so yes. And what we're supporting the first ever captive elephant reintroduction in Laos, and elephants seem to be very easy to reintroduce to the wild. Relative to other animals, one is they're extremely intelligent, and the food source is not necessarily difficult. What elephant eats is easily found, and so there's no real reason, doesn't make sense, to not allow elephants to have maximum freedom and live in the wild.
Has COVID impacted you at all in terms of getting to the orangutans and looking after them?
Yeah, COVID has been really dreadful for us for 2 things. One is reduce our fundraising, because I haven't been able to get out and fundraise. and because of the economic recession associated with our income has dropped. At the very time, we need maximum outcomes in the field. But in the field, it's getting worse. There's an acceleration of deforestation, acceleration of poaching, as people who see there's lack of law and order and they lose their income are destroying the environment and poaching animals to supplement their income. And then we're seeing the reaction all over the world. In Indonesia, they brought in, let's say, this new omnibus law, which is stripping away environmental protections in order to boost the economy from recession. So we're seeing an acceleration of destruction, and at the same time we have reduced income. So it's a double whammy. It's really hit us hard. At least as far as the actual contact, we hired a new wonderful field manager, Hardy, a young Indonesian activist, environmental activist. So we brought him on the 1st of January, and he's out in the field now because literally in Perth, Western Australia, I'm not allowed to leave the state on this kind of COVID lockdown. So, but thank God we have some wonderful, dedicated young Indonesians, who are taking up the slack, and doing, a fantastic job out in the field.
So are you feeling trapped? I mean, you're able to normally move around quite freely, and this must be, how's your psyche holding up at the moment?
Oh no, it's fine from my perspective, but it's my job was basically two things: was going into the field and ensuring and enacting the outcomes in the field to save the orangutans, and secondly being the spokesman. Doesn't make sense, connecting with people and organizations to gain the support for the orangutans, and that meant me traveling. And so I traveled normally for the last few years. I traveled every month, either I was in the field or I was traveling to another city or country to raise the funds. But I haven't been able to do that for a whole year now. So yeah, it's certainly a big lifestyle change, I guess.
Leif, in different times, I won't say normal times because I don't know what the normal is going forward. Do you do orangutan tours? I mean, do you take people into to forests to interact with orangutans, or just to look, or both?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, they're all delayed until 2022, but normally about 6 times a year, I take groups from easy. We're sitting on boats eating fried bananas, and I'm just pointing out the orangutans and the other animals in the forest, to hardcore trekking, and going out into the jungle and seeing orangutans that way. So I have a variety of eco tours, and so I do this on a fundraising basis. People do a minimum amount of fundraising or donation, and then obviously pay for the tour. Then I take groups of 10 to 12 out into the rainforest to connect with these beautiful species and other animals. Yeah, and it's very rewarding for people.
And how long do those tours last?
They normally last from 1 week, 7 days to 10 days. Yeah, and so we have a variety of them, from super nice and easy to adventure, and so I run the different ones, and there's different time periods. And one of the good things is most people innocently go to the tourist traps, which are exploiting the orangutans and putting the wild populations at risk. So we go to see orangutans in the right way, and we meet the real conservationists, and the real programs. And so it's far more rewarding and connecting than if people just go themselves and innocently get taken to the tourist traps.
Now, do we camp?
As I said, some of them it's like we're staying in hotels and seeing most of the rainforest from the cool river boats. And some of them, yeah, we camp. I normally only camp for one night, I find usually people love the adventure sometimes of going out camping in a rainforest, and sleeping in the tents at night. But one night is usually enough for people. Then we go back and there it was, where there's there's a bath and some running water. But like I said, I run a variety of tours through our eco tour partner, Orangutan Odysseys. Yeah, and they as well, and they have the local guides to help people carry their bags and help them up hills, or and make sure that everyone is looked after.
I remember going camping here in the Delta, in the Okavango Delta, and we were there for 4 or 5 nights with no running water. And I just remember this revolting feeling of every night you slather on anti-mosquito stuff, and every morning you put on sunblock. So all I had vision, I mean, there was no bathing, there was no showering, there was no nothing. It's just this cream that kept going on day after day after day. That was not me. I hated it, I have to be honest.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be tolerated in Indonesia. Indonesians you've got to bath every day. So when we're in the jungle, we go down and bathe in the river, and there's actually, because some up to the volcanic islands, we'll go to an area where there's hot water springs. So it's in the river, but there's these areas, these warm areas. So you basically can have a warm bath in the rainforest, in the river. Yeah, so we at least do that. So we go down the bays and have a bath there. And of course, when we're at the small hotels, they have their own showers and everything.
You said earlier that orangutans have no natural predators. Does that mean there are no crocodiles, alligators, or things like that?
And no, exactly, no natural predators. Because there's actually 2 ways, broad ways a species can adapt to the environment. One is by natural selection, and that's when, for example, let's say a lion has lots of offspring through its life, and each of the offspring is genetically a little bit different, and nature will select which offspring is most adapted to the changing environment, and the rest won't survive. And so it invests heavily in lots of infants, but only a few of them will survive to reproduce and pass on this generation. The second option is to adapt to the environment by culture. In order to adapt by environment culture, you have to be born with a vacant brain, right? The lion, for example, is hardwired. It's 90% instinct and 10% learning. And that's why you don't have to have a reintroduction program for feral cats. They just know what to do, even though they've been in captivity for generations, because they're 90% instinct, 10% learning. Orangutans are the other way around, 10% instinct, 90% learning. So they're born with these vacant brains, and they're programmed by the mother over long maternal periods, long periods of learning. The 9 years, 8, 9 years, and 12 years for the females of learning is programming that brain. And because they're investing so much into so few offspring, they can't cope with any level of predation. If you just kill 1 or 2 infants or one mother in a population a year, the population spirals into extinction, because it's a strategy which is fantastic for adapting an environment, but only when you have no natural predator. And so that's why this is one of the reasons they're so prone to extinction. For example, we do tiger conservation, and what we know is we stop the poaching in the area. In 5 years, the area is full of tigers again. Even though the population decimated, they quickly expand because they produce more offspring than would normally survive. And because, let's say, some of the tigers have been poached, they just expand and fill the ecological niche again. And so, but orangutans, being slow reproducing, they can't respond. They don't have the capacity to expand out quickly to fill those niches.
Are there any questions for Leif? If you have them, please pop them in the chat box and I'll relay them to him. Colleen says she's on board for coming to do an action adventure with you.
Oh, fantastic. I'd love to have you on board. If you go to our website and you go on how to help eco tours, or go to the Orangutan Odyssey site, and you look up Leif Cocks tours, and you can see the variety. They give the schedule and the itinerary and the rating of difficulty, and yeah, have a look and choose one that really suits you.
I think Pauline would go for the really difficult one.
Yeah. But
cool.
one wonderful things is I get to meet some fantastic people, take them in rainforest. But the flip side to that is going back to the rainforest and connecting to our rainforest home and seeing orangutans in the natural environment, which is very different to seeing orangutans in a zoo. Often, people who live full and rich lives, come back saying it's the most important and most significant experience of their lives. It can be quite meaningful. So it's a wonderful win-win situation. We raise money to save the orangutans, but we also provide people with life-changing, meaningful experiences.
What about snakes?
Mm-hmm. I've never seen one on my eco tour. In my other adventures, working in a rainforest, and rehabilitating orangutans, I've stepped on a few over the years. I've never been bitten. But no, actually on the eco tours, I've never actually seen one. You got to be pretty unlucky to see one. Only time we've actually ever seen him is when we're in the boat and we've seen him swimming across in the water. Yeah,
I'm thrilled.
But myself and the local guides, which assist everybody, we're pretty knowledgeable, so we don't expect any problems.
And spiders?
There's spiders, but again, it's not a huge not a huge problem. Yeah.
It's not like living in Australia where everything's out to kill you, right?
Well, that's right. Yeah, from an Australian perspective, it's like, it's easy.
It's so funny. I mean, Joburg is a city, right? And this past week, we've had a hippo walking around one of the northern suburbs. He got away from wherever he lived, and suddenly he was in people's gardens taking swims in their pools. So it's a lot of fun. And in my area, we sometimes have a baboon that comes off the mountain. So it's kind of like getting back to nature and all that. Won't you please remind us of the names of your books? And they're available on Amazon, I presume.
Yes, Amazon or directly from my website. There's Orangutans, My Cousins, My Friends, and Finding Our Humanity. Now, if you go to, I have a website, Leif Cocks, my name, all one word, .org, and that just gives all my papers and links to my books. You've got the pictures of my books and links to, and you can either buy it from Amazon, download the ebooks. My Cousin, My Friend is the audio version, or buy the hard copies from the Orangutan Project, and we'll post them out.
I don't post to South Africa. We don't get things if you post them. You have to courier them, or I kind of like recommend Amazon, quite frankly.
No, that's the same. That's the same as Indonesia. It's like you have, like I end up carrying these elephant collars. These, that we radio collar elephants and track them by satellite. No, don't post it. They'll be hanging up on somebody's wall. You got to, unfortunately, I know that feeling that you have to take it yourself, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Leif, I'm not seeing any questions coming up. I mean, I really thought somebody would have a question besides and spiders, but anyway. I want to thank you. Is there any, no, before you go, please tell us an endearing orangutan story.
I mean, there's many orangutan stories. I mean, from, one of the most beautiful moments I had was that, after 3 years, Tamara began the rainforest, being with her, from her birth and taking her back into the jungle. It's finding her after 3 years in the jungle and then putting my hand up, she's coming down and held my hand in the jungle. For the first time, two free, independent persons just connecting on an equal basis. So there's often very touching moments, and there's beautiful moments. For example, culturally and evolutionarily, there's no reason for unrelated male orangutan to care and look after an orphan baby of an unrelated female. science and, you know, and ecology would say, well, no, it should just ignore it, you know, makes sense because there's no genetic advantage. But that male orangutan will hold that baby and carry it and help it through the rainforest. The reason being is nothing to do with evolution or biology anymore. They're beautiful, self-aware persons with compassion and empathy. That makes sense? And they see the humanity, you know, in another living being and simply helps it for no other reason of pure altruism. So spending my life with orangutans has been, you know, countless beautiful moments of connecting with these wonderful beings that share our planet.
That's just so moving, and I'm actually really, really jealous. And on my bucket list is to get a hug from an orangutan one day. So thank you, and thank you for your time and for joining us at Life in a Garden Online. I really appreciate it. And everybody else, welcome back. Happy 2021, and let's take this year by the horns and defeat it, shall we?
Yep.
Leif, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Everybody, thank you for joining us. And
most welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.